I'd like you to hear the bio she wrote for herself. A Chicana from Pasadena, California, Sofia is the first in her family. Sorry. We love our job. She is the first in her family to leave home and graduate from a four-year university. Being a student and activist, she has worked hard to earn a bachelor's degree in English literature with a double minor in Chicana and Chicano studies and women's studies, as well as to engage in extensive community and on-campus activism. She plans to attend the University of Texas at San Antonio to earn her PhD in Chicana and Latina literature, become a university professor, and continue to bridge both scholarly and activist work. I am pleased to present Sofia Rivera.
I think I'm gonna start crying now. Okay, so I wrote something and I'll try and go as fast as I can, but so that'll be clear. Whenever I get in front of people, I get nervous, so the best way for me to start is to start by telling a story. And I wrote this last night. I'm sitting next to my 5-year-old niece, Destiny, as I write this. And I go back to the first time I heard my great-grandmother tell a story. I remember being the same age as my niece, full of dreams and completely unaware of the sometimes wounding realities of growing up, of being Chicana, of being a woman. I remember the sweet sound of her voice, the way her perfume smelled, and I can remember every detail of her story. And this wasn't just any story. This story that my bisabuela told me was the story of her crossing the border to the United States. This was the story she told of how her parents were murdered during the Mexican Revolution. She talked about how after migrating to the United States, to East Los Angeles, my great-grandmother was married at 13 years old, where she would raise her family. She spoke about her experiences as an immigrant, as an orphan, as a young mother, and as a wife. And I held on to every single word as if my life depended on it. I let the words seep into me, in my heart, and in my spirit. And it is here, in that memory, in her voice, in my fierce and loving great-grandmother's story, that my passion for literature began, both written and spoken word. But more importantly, it is where my passion for Chicana literature begins. And yet, as I went through the pipeline of this educational system, this memory just seemed to get pushed back. Almost to the point where I almost forgot. And I began to realize that our educational system is not set up for all students to succeed. I understood at a young age that the stories from my childhood were not being taught or written or in print. I saw that while I was given the opportunity to take courses that would prepare me to be eligible to apply to the university, my peers, my families, and my friends were not. We were tracked into classes, into specific classes. Some of us were even pushed out of high school. Somehow I made it out. And with the help of an amazing woman, Cynthia Torres from SDSU, I'm going to name her, who believed in me enough, I was able to obtain a diversity scholarship to attend San Diego State University. Being one of the first in my family to leave home and attend a four-year university, I came to SDSU unsure of myself and a little afraid of the world. I had decided to major in English, to the surprise of many, and much of the reactions were, what are you going to do with English? Are you going to teach? And for the first 2 years, I was basically a walking ghost. I was here physically, but mentally, I was not present. And there was something missing. But I also found myself placing myself in the back of classes, not speaking up, and letting myself be silenced. I was very doubtful of myself. I didn't feel that I was worthy to even be on a campus, to be in a university. And when I took and what I'm about to say, I'm saying it with an open heart, and I hope that you all listen with an open heart. This is in no way to criticize the department, but this is just my own personal experience. When I took my first English course, it was the very first time that I became painfully aware of my racial, my cultural, and class difference. And in these classes, they challenged me, right? Because I became aware of my own differences. I come from a very diverse community of working class people. I come from working class people. So being in these classes were extremely hard for me because it was the first time that I really did recognize that I was different. And you know, going through these classes, I just was silent. I hadn't said anything. I didn't speak up in class. I hadn't yet read any literature from Chicanas, from other people of color. And so, by fate, I really do think that this was not like by chance. This was meant to happen. By accident, I had to take a summer course, right? It's something that's required of all undergraduates, literary study, interliterary study. And Professor Brooks happened to be my teacher. It was an extra class and she was teaching it for the summer. And it was the first time that I felt that I was existent, you know, my existence, I was validated. It was the first time that I knew that I really was here and I deserved to be here. And she opened my world to so many things. And the fact that the main piece of literature that we read was written by a Native American woman writer. And for me, that was just groundbreaking. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And she saw that in me. She saw that hunger and that starvation for wanting to read stories about people like me, because I brought them with me to the university. And so I also wanted to say, you know, I took her class again. I took her class again in the fall, and it was the first time that I was ever able to read a piece of literature by a Chicana woman, a Chicana lesbian feminist to be exact. And her giving me that opportunity, that's when I knew this is what I wanted to do. And so I want to personally thank Professor Brooks, and I want to thank Professor Serrato, and I want to thank Professor Borgstrom, and I want to thank Professor Nericho, specifically these people, because they were able to open up that world to me about there being, you know, literature outside of the canon, right? That's valid too. And that these alternative knowledges, that these, you know, counter stories, they're real and they're existent, and they deserve to be valued too. So I also wanted to, I wrote a little poem, being creative, and this will be the end of it, but this is dedicated, this is dedicated to my family, to Professor Brooks, and I'll go ahead and say it. This is for you. This is for the time that Audre Lorde spoke to me when she said, "Your silence will not protect you." When I couldn't find the courage to write, this is for the English professor who told me to be fearless. She said to me, "You must be brave and you must remember the story." The same woman who told me that bearing witness is a political act of resistance and that I must remember and survive to tell the story. This is for the time Sherry Moraga reminded me that whoever I am, I must believe that I am not and never will be the only one who suffers. For the time Gloria Anzaldúa spoke to me and said, to survive the borderlands, you must live sin fronteras, be a crossroads. This is why I write. For the words Adrienne Rich gave me when she said that she was choosing not to suffer uselessly. For the courage she gave me when she said, you must choose to love with all of your intelligence. For the women's studies professor who said my words could heal, and to think of myself as a pen-wielding bruja. For the time Teddy Monaga taught me how to love myself in the war years. For the time Bell Hooks said that to me that love heals and that we recover ourselves in the act and art of loving. And this is why I write. And for the time Gloria Anzaldúa encouraged me to keep struggling. No se raje, chicanita, she told me. For the time Adrienne Rich told me that freedom is daily, prose-bound, and routine remembering. Because to remember is an act of survival. She taught me that freedom and liberation is work. And this is for my great-grandmother who told me my first story about love and loss and revolution. And lastly, this is for my grandmother and my mother, the first women to teach me how to be fearless. This is for you.